Hey friends, my name is Nate Nibs. Thank you for joining us on this Spiritual Practice Thursday as we look at the Enneagram, and today we are exploring the Enneagram 9. It is all about nines today, and we're still in that gut triad, that section of the Enneagrams, number 8, 9, and 1, these three personality types, and looking at how they shift and move in stress and security and health, and ways that we can be mindful and spiritually aware if we're a 9 today, or if we know someone that is a 9, to respond to them with grace and peace. So to start talking about a 9, one thing to point out with the Enneagram is that the 9 sits at the top. It has been said by some folks that 9 is at the top of the Enneagram because it can see itself in every other position. So if you are a 9, or if you know someone that is a 9 on the Enneagram, it might take them a while to figure out who they are in this personality typology. Because they can see themselves in different positions and understand other perspectives and points of view, 9s sometimes forget who they are because they can be absorbed in other perspectives. Now, this is what makes 9s a peacemaker, a natural mediator, a great friend and ally, but it can also be a struggle for 9s internally because they are balancing their perspective on understanding others with their own needs to express themselves. So a 9 will do almost anything to avoid conflict. 9s do not like creating conflict, or even things that might not create conflict, but they are afraid will. For example, you do not want to ask a 9, where do you want to go out for dinner tonight if you're with a group of friends? Because they don't want to make that decision. Because if one person wants tacos but another person wants Italian, they don't want to upset either one by choosing one or the other. 9s can sometimes get lost in trivial tasks. They can know that something needs to be done, but then notice that something is out of place here. The laundry needs to get folded, the dishes need to get emptied, the whatever has to happen next. And so they get distracted by different tasks and can sometimes struggle to get started. 9s can be slow starters that way. Once 9s get started, they can really move. They can achieve they can achieve a lot once they begin. But that first step in beginning takes a lot of effort. 9s will often choose a path of least resistance in relationships and friendships. They don't want to upset the boat too much, and they really like routines and habits and ways that things just have a natural flow, so they know where the peace is and they don't have to decide one way or another. Now, as you might be able to imagine, with all of the ways that 9s seek to maintain peace and a good rapport with others, with all the ways that they can see the perspectives of everyone else, that they can be a mediator, that they can be someone that understands where folks are coming from, even if they seem to be coming from irreconcilable views. 9s can absorb all of that different energy and perspectives and ideas. But that can also lead them to pushing down their own energy and perspective and ideas. And that is why I really like this cat meme for Enneagram 9s. And when you zoom in on the 9, you really see their bubbling inner aggression. 9s hold things in, sometimes for a very, very long time. They will hold things in until they can't hold it in anymore, and that bubble will eventually burst. 9s have to find healthy ways to release those bubbles along the way, instead of just pushing down and holding and trying to absorb, because 9s can struggle with being self-forgetting. Because they're maintaining the peace, because they're seeing other perspectives, because they're mediating between various views, they can push their own perspectives down, their own opinions down. They forget themselves, and they need to be able to claim themselves so that we can have their voice and value in our communities. So a healthy 9, as I've said a few times, is a natural mediator. They are great conversationalists. They see the value of perspectives. They can harmonize views that should not otherwise go together. A 9 will be able to see this and make this. They can just create those Venn diagrams in their heads. They are unselfish. They are flexible. They're inclusive. 9s aren't really attached always to their own way, and so they can move. They can change their perspective as new information arises. They develop and grow in great ways naturally when they're at their most healthy. An average 9, if they're not super healthy but not super stressful, they're going to be easygoing. They're going to be sweet. They might be a little stubborn every now and then. Occasionally they'll be out of touch with their anger, and that can be where the stubbornness comes from. Because they don't want to assert themselves, because they don't feel like they can assert themselves, they're pushing down their perspective. But you can only push down for so long until it has to come back up. An unhealthy 9 is going to become very dependent on others. They can struggle with codependency sometimes because they don't want to make decisions that risk a relationship or that could cause a rupture or that they imagine might create some sort of difficulty. Sometimes the difficulty isn't what it actually would be, but how they imagine it would be so much worse. And so they want another to help make that decision. So that's a 9 at their least healthy will struggle with that sort of dependency, codependency, numbing behaviors to try to forget how they're pushing their perspectives down. Now the best thing about a 9 is that they are just fantastic friends and they can be in a group and connect with everyone. My best friend is a 9 and I love them for all of the ways that they are able to see the world and harmonize things and create new ideas and get amazing work done. But what 9s struggle with is hearing the message of how they matter. Because if you give a 9 a compliment, they might start undercutting it in a variety of different ways, imagining how you're saying this, but they want to deny it, and they might think it's patronizing or not true. So they've got to be able to hear those compliments, but it's hard to hear them. You can think about a 9 like this. It's a bit like a duck on water, right? It looks smooth moving across the surface, but underneath it is just paddling and paddling and paddling. Or if you see someone treading water, you know their head is above water, but they're moving their arms, they're kicking their legs. There's a lot of effort going on that you just don't see. So here's some questions to consider to see if you are a 9 or if there are some 9s in your life. And again, we share these not to say, not to be number thumpers, right? Like we're not dictating a personality on someone. We're just trying to understand one another. So you might be a 9 if you are able to see multiple points of views. And when you see multiple points of views, you have a difficult time understanding exactly where you stand. You might be a 9 if you are easily distracted and daunted by the prospect of a single-minded task. You've just got to do one thing. You can't do anything else. Do you think about that one thing, or do you think about everything else? You might be a 9 if you quickly and often find the easiest way out of a problem, even if it's not the healthiest or safest one. And I use safe to talk about feelings. Are you avoiding feelings sometimes with those quick exits? You might be a 9 if passive aggressive tendencies often bubble up and you are surprised for them, as are the people that you are spending time with. You might be a 9 if you think other people's opinions are more important and valued than your own. And for a 9, you might have a hard time prioritizing your to-do list. You might not even understand the concept of a to-do list because you aren't sure which aspects of your day need to be done first. So with the Enneagram, it recognizes how our personalities shift and move and develop. And so for 9s, we've got to remember that they can move to a 6 space in health. So as you see in that chart, the arrow goes away from the 9 towards the 6. In that 6 space, and we'll get to the 6s in a few weeks and everything will start to make more sense. But in that 6 space, 9s start to be overcommitted, very worried, very rigid, very anxious, and they don't always know why. These 9s in Unhealth become self-doubting, and because they're self-doubting, making decisions is even more difficult. Like, remember, a 9 wants to be able to see a lot of perspectives, understand where folks are coming from. They don't always want to force their opinion. Even if they have a strong opinion, they'll be able to see something in yours, and if it balances out, they'll mediate that, and they don't need to push theirs on you. But if they're unhealthy, they're falling back into this pattern of, well, maybe I don't really know what I think. Maybe I don't know what I should do. Maybe I shouldn't say anything. But then, as that meme showed, right, there's that inner bubbling of aggression just below the surface. But in security, when a 9 is healthy, when they are receiving energy and assurance and just living in the grace and peace that they have been created for, as you see the arrow pointing to 9s comes from 3. So 9s, when they feel comfortable, when they feel safe, they are decisive. They can make great, thoughtful decisions that balance things well. That's why we call them the Peacemakers, because they make peace. They're confident. They're in touch with their own agenda, and they can achieve that agenda. They are healthy and seeking genuine peace and harmony. A lot of times we can seek a surface level peace just to get by, but a healthy 9 is going to go above and beyond that. They're going to find true peace and harmony with their relationships and with others. Now in the Enneagram, in addition to the ways that we move in stress or security, with 9s moving to 6 in stress, becoming more self-doubting, struggling with those codependency. 6 is called the Loyalists, so we see a bit of that unhealthy loyalty sometimes there. But in health, receiving from the 3 space, becoming decisive, becoming more in touch with their own agenda and plans and opinions, and being able to voice them well while maintaining that harmony and peace. In addition to the ways that we move in stress and security, the Enneagram also recognizes the wings that we have. So a 9 can have an 8 wing or a 1 wing. And we can think about this like shades of the color red, right? There's a whole spectrum of light to dark reds and pink hues and everything in between. That's what these wings tend to represent, or at least as I understand them. So a 9 with an 8 wing is going to have some struggles internally because, as we saw last week, the Enneagram 8 is a very vocal, powerful, can be a steamroller sometimes of a leader. They are energized, they are confident, they are outgoing. And so a 9 that's balancing that 8 energy is sometimes struggling with, how much can I push? Or can I really be that leader? A 9 with an 8 wing is likely to be more of the extroverted of the two in this, but there's always some balance there. A 9 with a 1 wing is going to have a very strong sense of right and wrong, good or evil, morality, ethics, knowing this is the right way to go. Now, as we'll see next week, knowing clearly this is the one right way to go, it can make them a little more critical, or at least others will hear them as critical, but internally, a 9 with a 1 wing is going to be more critical of themselves than they ever are to others. And they live in that struggle, but they have a lot of confidence, they have a lot of integrity, and they are just steadfast friends. Now, each of these Enneagram personalities has a sort of deadly sin or a vice that they struggle with, something that separates them from the fullness of their potential and their true connection with the image of God within them. And the struggle for 9s is sloth. 9s can be spiritually lazy. They can merge with others very easily, putting the priorities of others before the priority of themselves. Because they're valuing others so much, which is just, when you have a 9 friend or family member or coworker, you know that you matter to them. But sometimes they're putting those values and preferences of others above themselves, so much so to avoid conflict or what they think might create conflict, that they don't have the inner peace to become the person we need them to be. That's where we can see the sloth in the 9. And so the diligence that 9 needs to have is their virtue. That diligence, that drive, that way to self-actualize and achieve by consciously knowing what their agenda and plan is, that's what they've got to pursue. They've got to have that perspective to say, I know what I can do, I know what I do well, I know where I'm going, I know what I have to learn, I know the skills that I have developed, and I will go that way diligently. A friend in Texas is a 9, and every Monday at work, or at least this is how what happened before COVID, but every Monday they would have their administrative assistant look over the schedule of the church for a week, and then the administrative assistant would create this to-do list for the senior pastor. And the senior pastor did that because they knew, if I have to create my own to-do list every Monday, I am probably going to forget about something. So they had their coworker help them create this to-do list, and that was how they found diligence together. SNAP, this process of mindfulness and thoughtfulness for 9s, starts with stopping, as it always does. Stop, notice, ask, pivot. And 9s, you might be a 9 if you have a really easy time stopping. 9s can just slow down and stop on a dime. It's natural for them. But 9s have to remember to stay focused in their stopping, to just notice or take in and absorb, to have that mindfulness rather than a wandering mind, or as some Buddhist traditions call it, the monkey mind, right? You've got to have the mindfulness of stopping. Notice for a 9 means notice what's going on around you and how engaged you are. Is conflict present or threatening or just perceived? And in any of those, how do you see yourself responding to it? And if there is, are you setting aside your preferences? Are you setting aside your wants, desires, your agendas? Are you pushing yourself down so that others are louder, more vocal, seeking a peace that kind of is a peace, but you're not included in it, so you've got that inner aggression bubbling up again. Now, another thing that 9s have to notice is, do I see the big picture, or am I lost in all the details, right? So that's some things that they can notice. And then they've got to ask themselves, what do I believe in this moment? A 9 needs to ask themselves, is my opinion unvalued, less than, unworthy, not needed? A 9 needs to ask themselves, do I have to sacrifice my dreams and wants and desires to maintain peace. A 9 needs to ask themselves, is it true that I cannot handle conflict? A 9 needs to ask themselves, will something terrible happen if I admit that I have this bubbling anger or even a single bubble happening within me right now? And then a 9 needs to ask themselves, how does all this make me feel? Does it make me feel frustrated? Does it make me feel numb? Does it make me feel exhausted? Does it make me feel like stopping and taking a nap? And do I believe all this is true? Do I believe that my presence is less valued or wanted, that my opinions are not needed, that I could not survive this conflict, that my dreams and hopes and desires just aren't as important as everyone else's? And then 9s really need to ask themselves, what if I let go of those doubts? 9s can doubt their doubts. They can ask themselves, what if my opinion is valued and wanted and needed? And that's the pivot. That's the P of snap. Express their thoughts, even if it's angry, directly, and remember that it's okay. To be direct in telling others, this is what I need you to do, or this is what I need to you. Waking up, breaking from that slothful mold that they can fall into, and engaging in the present moment. Talk and let others listen. That can be a huge pivot for 9s. Sometimes you can interrupt a 9 just as they're starting a sentence, and if you catch yourself cutting them off and then say to them, I'm sorry I interrupted you, what were you saying? They might have forgotten what they were going to say. So 9s need to be able to talk and let others listen. And if you know a 9 and care about a 9 or love a 9 individual, you need to remember, I need to give them the space to talk and not talk over them so that I can listen. 9s need to find some way as well in their pivot to direct their life's agenda, whether it's a to-do list, a task organizer, some sort of journaling, some sort of plan to say, this is where I'm going and this is how I'm going to get there. In The Road Back to You, Ian Cron and Suzanne Stabile write, the healing message 9s need to hear is this: we see you and your life matters. God didn't invite you to this party to live someone else's life. We need you here. We need 9s. We need the peace that they can create, the harmony that they can offer, the ways that they can bring different perspectives together. We need 9s in our lives. And so if you are a 9 or if you know a 9, some paths for spiritual transformation for them is journaling or thinking about the question, what is the calling on my life? What is my agenda? What should I be diligent about? And then they have to remind themselves, am I pursuing this or am I postponing it for peace? They need to have some sort of task management system, some sort of reminder, and a big one is practice saying no. 9s need to be able to say no and just realize that it's a complete sentence. They don't have to always they can rest, right? There's a difference between sloth and rest. And probably one of the biggest steps for spiritual transformation with 9s is recognizing that their unique voice matters. That they can express themselves and we need them to. We need to know their thoughts. We need to know their perspectives. We need to be able to see what they see and hear from their voice, because we're all created in the image of God, and God moves and breathes through each one of us in a variety of ways, and sometimes the Spirit just strikes. And if a 9 in that moment thinks, well, this isn't important for me to share, it could be at that very time the most important thing to share. So thank you, 9s, for being a part of this world and sharing your gifts with us. And remember, We need you to share these gifts with us. Next week, we will be moving into the one space and wrapping up the gut triad. So thank you for being with us on this Spiritual Practice Thursday and looking at the lives of Enneagram 9s. And we will see you next week.